As you know, we've been focusing this series on getting past the gatekeeper, and we want to help you. There are many different strategies, many different ideas. Now imagine if there was a whole book about the gate and about how you can get past the gatekeeper. Would you not want to learn what's in that book? Well, my guest today is coming from the archives, and he wrote a book on just that topic. Hey, everyone. Welcome to another great episode of the Sales Evangelist podcast. I'm your host, Donald Kelly, the Sales Evangelist, and I'm so excited for another great episode. I'm so excited to be here with you today. And today we're going to talk about the key to the gate. How can we get past those gatekeepers? What do we need to understand, and how do we make this happen? This is written by one of our friends, Mr. Anderson. He came on our podcast a while back, and he's got the metaphoric key to the gate. In this episode, it's one that I did way back. This was episode I think 2 something. And now we're at episode number 1497. Crazy, right? But I figured the content from that episode can still benefit you. If this is your first time listening to this episode or to this podcast, I ask you to go ahead and subscribe to our show. Please, it just goes such a long way. Hit that subscribe button. Also, connect with me on LinkedIn and also on Facebook. We have 2 groups there. It's called the Sales Evangelizers on LinkedIn and Facebook. Now, I don't want to take up too much of the time. Today, we're going to break down some of these things, why it's more important for sellers now more than ever to understand how to get past the gatekeeper. We're going to talk about why people have such a hard time getting access to decision makers. We're going to talk about some of the key strategies. And then we're going to talk about, is cold calling dead? It's going to be good. You're going to love it. To the decision maker nowadays? Is it more so because the gatekeeper is not allowing them? They're not getting to cold calls. Nobody not answering their cold calls, or what are your thoughts?
Well, it's a great question, and it kind of depends. But let me just say this: if you're a real decision maker inside of a large organization, you may have a couple hundred people hitting you up every day for some sort of product or service. And the truth is, these decision makers don't have time to talk to every single salesperson that wants to talk to them. If they did, they wouldn't do anything else because their time's limited. And so they do. They employ gatekeepers, is what I call them. And the gatekeeper could be, could have any number of different titles. A gatekeeper could be a secretary. It could be a receptionist. It could be some sort of an employee in the company. It doesn't really matter what the title is, but when you call in to talk to this decision maker, or you're trying to contact this decision maker, one of the gatekeeper's jobs is to weed out those kind of people that she doesn't feel or he doesn't feel should have time in front of the decision maker. So you really have to find a way to differentiate yourself if you're going to get in front of these high-powered decision makers and make them sell.
Recommended or created to help these individuals get to this gatekeeper, get past the gatekeeper?
Great question. Well, there's different principles that you should know. So first of all, you have to know that no organization is the same. I could tell you how it would work in one organization that might work completely differently in a different organization. So what I'd like to do is talk about some broad principles.
Sure.
And then some specific strategies that have worked for me in certain situations. Let me tell you. This high-level decision maker an email. And like most emails, it got ignored. In fact, most of the time when you send an email to a high-level decision maker, the chances are they're going to ignore it. Especially if it's you're selling something. Well, I called in a little while later and I tried to ask for the decision maker, and of course, like most decision makers, they're not available. A lot of times they're in a conference, or they're golfing, or they're in a meeting, or they're just not available because they don't want to talk to you, which is often the case. But I'd sent this email before, and when I talked to his secretary, I said, do you mind if I just resend this email to him and copy it to you just to make sure he gets it? And she said, that'd be fine. And I noticed when I was speaking to her that she was very professional, she was very courteous, and I mentioned that to her. I just said, you know what, I noticed you're very professional and courteous. I'm just going to mention that in the email. And I did. The first line on the email said something like this. I just mentioned how professional and courteous she was, and mentioned that I was going to be in in New York on these days. And anyway, the first line of the email was a compliment about her, and I'd written it to him but copied it to her. Now, do you think that she has any incentive to let her boss see an email that compliments her more than she would, say, another salesperson who might have been a little bit rude?
Of course she's going to be push that thing forward.
Well, the principle that I used here, is the principle in psychology that's called positive reinforcement. So when somebody does something that helps you out, so in other words, she was willing to let me resend the email and copy it to her. When somebody does something that helps you out, you immediately reward them. I found that, if I can find something to sincerely compliment a gatekeeper to his or her boss, that's been one technique that's been very effective. But the technique works because it's based on a principle.
Are there any other strategies or principles that you've seen to be effective with salespeople to get past the challenge of the gatekeepers?
Sure. Let me give you a couple other things to think about. So there was one time I called in, and I was going to talk to kind of a mid-level person because I thought that was the person who would handle what I was selling. Well, I called in to speak to this person, and she actually hung up on me. She just, right in the middle of when I was talking, she hung up on me. It was pretty rude, actually. It wasn't that long afterwards that I got an appointment with her boss. And her boss invited her, the very person who had hung up on me, to this teleconference. And when I was, at the teleconference, this time she was not rude. She didn't hang up. She listened politely the entire time. And I learned something there. A lot of times in organizations, influence kind of flows downhill. What I mean by that is, if you're in doubt about where to start in the organization, I would call higher than you think you need. So even if you think a mid-level director may be the one who handles what you sell. So let's say you're selling a technology product and you want to talk to, say, a director of technology. It still might be to your advantage to call the CEO. And let me tell you why. If I call the CEO, I'm probably not going to get him or her. I'm probably not going to get to talk to the decision maker right off. But a lot of times, the gatekeeper, the CEO's secretary or receptionist, may tell me, hey, he's not the right guy to talk to. You need to talk to so-and-so. And then I've found if I've treated that gatekeeper well, which we've talked about ways to treat the gatekeeper well, but if I've treated her well, a lot of times she'll forward my email that I sent earlier down to a mid-level or lower person than the CEO. And that email and her willingness to do that gives my email a ton more weight. But the principle is, influence tends to flow downhill. Start a little higher than you think you need. I like to go straight to the top. And a lot of times they'll tell me exactly who I need to speak to. The truth is, every call is going to be a little bit different. But one of the things, when you get on the phone, you want to be confident. And when you probably want to ask for the person by their first name and just confidently say, hey, can I speak with so-and-so? Now, again, you're not being rude and you're not being pushy. You're just confidently, you're acting and your tone of voice basically says, hey, I have a right to talk to this person. It's not a really quivering, timid way of asking. You ask confidently, hey, can I speak to Chad? Can I speak to Donald? Can I speak to Cindy? Whoever it is. Ask confidently to speak to the person you want to speak to. And remember, when you're trying to get an appointment, a lot of times people make the mistake of trying to sell their product right then and there. And especially if you're dealing with a high-level decision maker, that in many instances, not all, but in many instances, they may be put off. Sometimes I think a better approach is to just try to get the appointment solidified. You don't need to sell the secretary on your product. You don't need to sell the gatekeeper on your product. You want to treat them very politely, but your end goal should be to get the appointment, to get in front of the decision maker, so you have enough time to sell. Leave the selling for the appointment. Don't try to do it right there.
That is awesome. If someone out there, listeners, want to get in touch with you, what's the best place for them to connect with you?
No, if they could get on my website, it's XFactor Edge, so XFactorEege, XFactorEdge.com.
All right, perfect.
Or they could also just reach me on my direct line, 801-669-2425.
Woo-wee! Man, I'm telling you, there's some good stuff up in this episode today. We go back into the archive and we got some amazingness. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we got that for you today, and I hope that you were able to pull something out of it. I hope that it's able to help you, whether you're selling to enterprises or you're selling to a mom and pop shop down the street. There's still gatekeepers. Take the principles. Check out the book, actually. We have a link down below so you can find it in the show notes, and you can see and learn from those principles yourself. Tell Mr. Anderson that you heard him here on the Sales Evangelist podcast again. As always, if you haven't done so already, check out our sponsors as well. They're giving away some amazing offers, and they're doing this because they like you and they like us. Take advantage of it. And then finally, check us out on LinkedIn and Facebook. Search for the group, the Sales Evangelizers. That's where our community members come together, share thoughts and insights, and help each other network. I mean, who wouldn't want to do that? Learn from some of the best. Again, the Sales Evangelizers. As always, I want you to find more of those ideal customers. I want you to know what to say when you reach out to them. I want you to close more deals. But most importantly, I want you to go out and do big things. Thanks so much for listening today. Hey, thanks so much for taking the time to watch this video today. If you enjoyed the content, I ask you to go ahead and hit that like button, that thumbs up at the bottom right-hand corner. Also, to make sure to subscribe if you haven't done so already. This way, we'll keep you up to date with all the latest sales strategies, latest tools, and things that are going to help you to not only find more prospects, but to close more deals. Thanks so much.